So we've had a lot of hot, dry weather in the UK recently, and that's meant that as I was walking, I saw some desiccation cracks. So they're in the floor here, and if you look, you can see that you kind of have these, they almost look like tiles really, these really little irregular tiles. And this is where water has evaporated from the surface and has left these kind of these little things. So where it's contracted is where the cracks have formed, and it'll evaporate most from the surface and then less as you go down. Meaning that if I was to cut this open, you'd actually see these V-shaped cracks going along here. So these can, and it wouldn't happen here, but in some cases, these can actually be infilled by other sediment. This would happen somewhere like a desert if you had, you know, a sudden a wadi, so a sudden kind of stream flowing through, which wouldn't really happen for very long. It would potentially deposit sediment into these cracks. Same with a flash flood. This sediment would go in, and if left undisturbed, this would lithify, so it would become rock, and it would be buried over millions and millions of years by more sediment, by more rocks, and eventually, potentially, it could be exposed to the surface. Now there are a couple of ways it can be exposed to the surface. One of the ways is that the actual surface, well, what was the surface at this point, so what was this kind of muddy floor, will be exposed itself. In this case, it'll have eroded out, and you'll see that what was that kind of dried out muddy layer will also have eroded, leaving the infilling actually kind of sticking out and making these almost web-like patterns on the surface. Alternatively, if you would say, imagine like a cliff that you're looking at, and you've got, let's say a normal cliff, you've got layers that go horizontally, and you could see them as V-shaped cracks. So they'd be something like this, and there'd be a different texture or a different colour of sediment inside them. Now, they are actually quite useful, because these kind of V-shapes are something called a way up indicator, meaning if you see their orientation, you know the orientation that that bed was when it was originally laid down. So beds are always laid down horizontally, and if you have a bed where these V-shaped cracks are at the top of it, and they look like that, then you have the top of the bed, and it's still the right way up, and there's been no forces that flipped it or bent it around